China commemorates the 110th anniversary of the Revolution of 1911. 61 people confirmed dead and over 100 missing after a boat sank in the Democratic Republic of Congo. U.S. officials meet with Taliban senior leaders in Doha. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. In business, Sri Lankan Airlines launches flights to Nairobi as it expands operations into Africa. And in sports, Egyptian talisman Mohamed Salah among 30 nominees for the coveted Ballon d'Or award. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. Great to have you along with me for this hour. We begin in China's capital, Beijing, which is commemorating the 110th anniversary of the Revolution of 1911, also known as the Xinhai Revolution. The Revolution of 1911 overthrew China's last imperial dynasty and ushered in the advent of modern China. President Xi Jinping led this morning's commemoration. Su Yiting has more.
Senior officials and representatives from all across China gathered at the Great Hall of the People to remember an important chapter in China's history. This year marks the 110th anniversary of the Xinhai Revolution that put an end to more than 2,000 years of imperial rule in China. The revolution is of great historical significance as it led to the establishment of the Republic of China and the following social changes in the country. President Xi Jinping delivered a speech at the event, stressing national integrity.
中国共产党领导是历史的选择。
The CPC was chosen to lead by history and by the people. Its leadership is very foundation and lifeblood of the party and the country, and it is the crux upon which the interests and the well-being of all Chinese people depend.
President Xi said Sun Yat-sen, the forerunner of China's democratic revolution, has been a champion of national unity and integrity. He also emphasized that CPC members are the strongest supporters, most loyal collaborators, and most faithful successors of Sun's undertakings.
以和平方式实现祖国统一。
National reunification by peaceful means best serves the interests of the Chinese nation as a whole, including our compatriots in Taiwan. We will adhere to the basic policies of peaceful reunification and one country, two systems, uphold the One China principle and the 1992 consensus, and work for the peaceful development of cross-strait relations. Compatriots on both sides of the Taiwan Strait should stand on the right side of history and join hands to achieve China's complete reunification and the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation.
This year not only marks the 100th anniversary of the Communist Party of China, but also the 110th anniversary of the Revolution of 1911. President Xi Jinping is calling on the Chinese people to learn from revolutionaries' noble patriotism and devotion to the motherland, and carry on the pursuit of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Su Yiting, CGTN, Beijing.
And heading back to the continent, let's go to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where at least 100 people are dead or missing after a boat sank in the Congo River. The incident happened in the northwestern province of Mongala. Authorities have confirmed that 61 people died during the accident. 39 other people have been rescued as local officials continue in search and rescue efforts. Now, for more on this, we are joined by Chris Ochemringa, standing by for us in Kinshasa. Chris, tragic events there on the Congo River. What more details do you have about this accident?
Well, authorities in the DRC have confirmed that 61 people died in that accident in the northwestern province of Mongala On Friday, officials in that area had said they had retrieved 51 bodies, but 10 more bodies were found, and that brings the total to 61 people. There are about 70 people who are still missing and 39 people who have been found. And search and rescue efforts are still going on, but some local officials in that area say that the hopes of finding more survivors are fading every second that passes, because the water has been flowing. It happened last night, on Friday night. The people were traveling at night, which is not allowed according to the navigation standards in the DRC, and many of the passengers on that boat didn't have life jackets. Now, boat accidents are very common in the DRC. In February this year, there were 76 people who died on the Congo River in the western province of Mai-Ndombe. Now, that action against boat owners and operators, because every year there are accidents that happen. The president has warned people, against traveling in these boats without life jackets. But the problem in the DRC is the enforcement. Traveling by boat is the main mode of transport in this country because it has a very poor road network and it's cheaper than other modes of transport. And so people all, use these boats to travel to different parts of the country. But the problem is the boats are in very poor condition, very old. And so the government, has to start taking action to ensure that lives are saved.
Again, Chris, sad news coming out of the Congo. Thank you for staying on top of that story for us, Chris Butchamringa. Much appreciated. Let's turn our attention to Libya. At least 6 migrants have been shot dead at a detention center as many escaped from the facility. That's according to the International Organization for Migration. An IOM official said overcrowding caused chaos at the Ghotshai Center in Tripoli. And the UN Refugee Agency reports that security forces detained more than 5,000 people over the past week in a crackdown against migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers. Authorities, however, describe the exercise as a campaign against undocumented migration and drug trafficking. Human rights group Amnesty International is calling on Libyan officials to charge those found to have committed crimes and release the innocent. Moving on, French President Emmanuel Macron has promised a new era for ties with Africa, particularly through the youth. He was speaking at the Africa-France summit in the French city of Montpellier. The meeting was organized in the hopes of creating a new approach to what critics dub as colonial attitudes carried from the past. The various issues were debated, including migration, new political movements, and strained relations between France and some African countries. This is following Macron's decision to cut down visas to Algerians, Moroccans, and Tunisians due to a dispute surrounding irregular migration. CGTN's Jane Keogh has more on the summit.
A continent of promise and hope. This is how French President Emmanuel Macron described Africa during the Africa-France summit.
A country like France, which has this very special history, has above all a responsibility, a task. It is to respond to the aspirations and the demands of the African youth and to have projects that match these aspirations and what they ask us to do, not what comes from here.
The meeting, focusing on Africa youth, brought together entrepreneurs, artists, athletes, and activists. Macron stressed that the continent's majority youth population is yearning for change.
Nous n'avons pas choisi notre histoire et notre géographie, y compris
Our generation, all of us, as we are, the question that is being asked of us is how do we embrace and build our future? And the debt that we owe the African continent is a debt with regard to a continent which is continuing to grow in an incredible manner, which fascinates the entire world, which sometimes frightens others, of which over 70% is comprised of young women and men, less than 30 years old, adolescents and children. It is a continent of promise, of hope.
I would like for this summit to be the start of something, the complete rupture of this posture that we can often qualify as paternalist, and also the rupture of this view of Africa, which is not a continent of suffering or unemployment or disease. It is a continent of youth, of resources, of optimism, of innovation.
During the summit, Macron also promised to give back 26 pieces of art to Benin looted from the Abomey Palace in 1892 during the colonial wars. This another step in solidifying relations with the African continent in what could be a new era for France and Africa ties. Jane Kale, CGTN.
Well, for some more perspective on relations between Africa and France, let's cross over to Paul Melly, who is a consulting fellow for the Africa program at Chatham House. Paul, welcome to Africa Live. Thanks for taking time to speak to us. Now, from what we saw at the meeting, France is looking to reset ties with the African continent. How would that new relationship look like? Paul?
Well, I think the challenge that Macron has been trying to tackle, and he's made a start on it, if you like, with this summit, is to try and broaden the relationship out beyond one that is just a relationship between government leaders and business elites. One of the old criticisms that always used to be made of that connection in the past was that it was too self-congratulatory, if you like. There were too many vested interest connections between political leaders in France and in Africa. And so this now new approach is really an attempt to broaden it out and really recognize the fact that Africa is a very young continent. It has a particularly high proportion of youth in the population. Expectations are changing. Of course, the internet, social media and satellite TV and so on means that young Africans are vastly more informed than earlier generations, and they're very much engaged with what's going on in the outside world. And so he's trying to develop a French strategy that actually connects to this new Africa, but it's always difficult because there are still contentious and complicated political problems, sensitive issues between governments, and which can find a popular echo, just as you were mentioning earlier in the bulletin about the dispute over visas. And there's currently a row with Mali over remarks by both the Malian Prime Minister and Macron himself about the French military engagement there. And so those sorts of difficult political issues will always be there. But I think what Macron's trying to do basically is both open up African perceptions of France and show that France is willing to engage across a broader and much more flexible range of issues.
All right,
responding
Paul.
To change.
Paul.
That's really what it is.
Well, Paul, on top of what you said, Africa is a young continent, as you mentioned. President Macron described Africa as a continent of promise and hope. How can Africa and France move forward given the history of colonialism and the often criticized military interventions? How do you see it?
Well, the military interventions, although they're often criticized now in the way they sometimes when things go wrong, there is a bit of a difference between the current interventions and those in the past. In the past, French troops would sometimes interfere directly in African politics, whereas the troops that are now in the Sahel were invited to come there. They came at the request of the Malian government. So although things don't always go perfectly, that dynamic is a bit different. And the other thing is that what Macron is trying to do is say that if African governments and also African populations want to change aspects of the relationship, it's up to them. So he made a very famous speech in 2017.
All right, Paul Melly, thank you for your insight and analysis. We're going to have to leave it there. We do get a sense of what you're trying to say. Let's move on, though, to Afghanistan, where the country's authorities say at least 46 people died after a suicide bomber attacked a mosque in the city of Kunduz. The blast on Friday wounded more than 140. The group ISIS-K has claimed responsibility. Zamari Lai Abbasan reports from Kabul.
The Friday attack was very brutal and it took place, which was a suicide attack inside a mosque related to the Shiite Muslims or Hazaras in Khanabad, Bandar area of Kunduz province and northeast of the country. The suicider enters in a mosque where hundreds of people were praying Friday prayers, and that's the time when he blows himself According to the Taliban, I've been talking with Zabihullah Mujahid and other authorities in Kunduz also. They've been telling that they've started their search investigation, and they will soon get to the cells of ISKP in Kunduz and elsewhere in the country, while the people in Afghanistan have already criticizing the Taliban. It was the third attack, and very bloody attack after the 26th of August attack inside Kabul airport, while there was an evacuation process which also killed and injured hundreds of people. So the criticism on Taliban is increasing, the fears among the people are also increasing, and that's something will be challenging for the Taliban in the future. I was also talking with experts. They believe that it's not now related only to Afghanistan, and extraordinary steps, initiatives should be taken by the regional countries, particularly the major ones like China, Russia, and Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Iran, particularly to tackle the threats of Daesh in the region.
Washington says it will hold two-day talks with the Taliban in the Qatari capital, Doha. The State Department said Friday officials will press the group to respect the rights of all Afghans. The Taliban has yet to confirm the meeting on October the 9th and the 10th, whether it will take place, but spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid tweeted pictures of a delegation aboard a flight for Doha. It will be the first in-person talk since the withdrawal of American troops over a month ago. And for more on this story, let's cross to Lazima Gomez, who is live for us in Doha. Lazima, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. What do we know about this meeting so far, Lazima?
Well, as you know, Qatar has been playing a key role in mediating talks between Taliban and the US as well as other countries since the start of the takeover of Afghanistan by Taliban. According to Al Jazeera, a Taliban delegation led by acting Afghan Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi has arrived in Doha to hold talks with Qatari officials and representatives of a number of other countries, including the US. US officials, including intelligence and Department of State, is soon to hold their first face-to-face meeting with Taliban officials. The meeting comes as the US government continues its efforts to bring American citizens as well as vulnerable Afghans out of Afghanistan. Furthermore, according to Al Jazeera, the US State Department stressed that the meeting did not indicate that the US state was recognizing the Taliban rule in Afghanistan. While the Taliban has insisted the US should honor the 2020 agreement it signed in Doha, where the US was given a time frame to leave Afghanistan, as well as unfreeze Afghan central bank assets worth billions of dollars. The key priorities of the meeting are said to be, firstly, of course, the safe passage of US citizens and Afghan citizens, as well as other foreign nationals. The talks will also ensure to press the Taliban not to allow Afghanistan to be a hotbed for any terrorist activities. They will further ask the Taliban to respect rights of women and girls, as well as the Afghanistan. Right now, they also want them to allow humanitarian agencies access into certain areas into Afghanistan, as currently Afghanistan stands a chance to be a huge part of a big humanitarian devastation. Talks will continue over today and tomorrow, so we will see what we have further.
All right, Lazima Gomez, let's leave it there for now. Appreciate that update and report. You are watching Africa Live. Time now for a short break, but here's what's ahead. Military and civilian leaders in Sudan's transitional government trade blame over the delayed peace process. And the Democratic Republic of Congo confirms a new case of Ebola 5 months after the most recent outbreak.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. Let's turn our attention to Sudan, where military and civilian leaders have been at loggerheads. The two sides are blaming the other for delayed peace processes and slow progress in the realization of democracy. Now, this comes almost a fortnight after Khartoum announced a failed coup attempt. Here is CGTN's Wanja Mungai with the story.
It's almost 3 weeks since a failed coup attempt was reported in Sudan. Since the events of September 21st, civilian protests, accusations between civilian and military leaders have ensued. The civilian leaders are accusing the military of a power grab.
I'm sure that until now, the military component is not keen on the completion of a civilian democratic transition. They aim at weakening the civilian authority through economic sabotage and encouraging ethnic protests and not handling them seriously to create a reality that allows them get over the democratic and civilian transition to take control of power in Sudan.
The military, on the other hand, blames the recent turmoil on civilian politicking and mismanagement.
We gave a promise in front of God to take this country to a democratic rule. This is a promise that we won't give up on. But this needs a program. It needs procedures. It requires us to move, not to stand still, just talking about elections. The transitional period should be limited, and we said that from the beginning.
The military and civilian leaders sharing power are tasked with returning the country to democratic rule. Elections are expected by late 2023, and there are fears a collapse of that partnership could cripple the economy.
The other likely result of a military takeover of the transition is to see the international partners turn off the taps of the all-important international financial assistance to Sudan. Sudan's economy is probably the most fragile component of its transition, and the transition's very fate probably rests on the welfare and well-being of the economy.
In the meantime, Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok has launched mediation talks to pacify differences between the two sides, but the outcome remains unclear. Wanja Mungai, CGTN.
Now on to the Democratic Republic of Congo now. The Ministry of Health there has reported an Ebola case in the east of the country. Health Minister Jean-Jacques Mumbugani said a 3-year-old boy tested positive for the virus and died in Beni City on Wednesday. The announcement comes 5 months after the most recent outbreak there was declared over. Beni is also an epicenter of an epidemic between 2018 and 2020, killing more than 2,000 people. Mbugani has assured that about 100 people who were in close contact with the victim are being monitored. The World Health Organization says it wants 40% of the global population to be vaccinated by the end of the year. To give us more insights on the existing inequalities surrounding the distribution of COVID-19 vaccines, we earlier spoke to Dr. Mary Stevens, the technical officer of the WHO Regional Office for Africa. Let's take a listen.
Well, let's quickly look at the statistics of what we have as at this morning with regards to vaccination on the continent. So far we have received 217 million doses of vaccines on the continent, and we have administered 153 million, which is about 70% of the doses we have received so far. A total of 64.7 million people have been fully vaccinated on the continent. Yes, so the inequity still remains. We have seen some improvement in terms of the vaccine access on the continent. For example, in September, we received about 23 million doses of vaccine, which was a 10-fold increase from the doses we received around June this year. But we are not where we want to be. but definitely not where we were before. If you remember earlier in October, we declared that about 15% of the countries in Africa met the 10% target, but definitely, yes, the inequity still remains. Most of the challenges we have, especially in Africa, is with regards to access to this vaccine. Yes, there are some countries that are dealing with issues of hesitancy and all that, but the major problem we have is access to the vaccine. And this is as a result of the problem with access to vaccines globally, manufacturing capacity, and where you have some of those high-income countries buying up these vaccines. So what we are calling on the global community basically to do is to make sure that the countries that have excess doses, they are sharing those doses. Those that have vaccinated a large proportion of their countries should give up their space on the queue for COVAX to access more vaccines so that they can deploy these vaccines to low and middle income countries. And of course, continue to enhance capacity for production of vaccine, especially in Africa as well. So we can ramp up the quantity of vaccines we have globally and therefore increase the vaccination coverage.
The South African government has once again called on the African Union Commission to revoke the decision to grant Israel an observer status in the continental body. International Relations Minister Naledi Pandor was speaking during a bilateral meeting aimed at further strengthening the relationship between South Africa and Palestine. CGTN's Yulisa Njamela has more.
At this bilateral meeting, the leaders representing the two nations reviewed the state of bilateral relations. They expressed their satisfaction with the cordial relations that exist between the two countries and signed a number of agreements.
We will review the existing memoranda of understanding and ensure that they are implemented. And we're going to work hard to ensure that we have stronger and many more people-to-people exchanges.
The meeting was mostly engaged with the issue of the Israel observer status granted by the AU.
There can be no justification for granting such status by the African Union, particularly given that the African Union publicly and strenuously objected to the deaths of Palestinians and the destruction of civilian infrastructure in your country.
The issue of the Israel observer status is due to be up for debate at the African Union.
We expect the African Union to stay by its own principles and to take action and decisions based on such principles. We hope that words and the voice of wisdom and voice of justice will prevail during the discussions.
The relations that exist between the two countries will further be strengthened by a planned state visit to South Africa by Palestinian President Abbas Mahmoud. Yulisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
Kenya says it will not recognize next week's expected ruling by the International Court of Justice on a maritime border dispute with Somalia. Although Kenya withdrew from the case earlier this year, the ICJ will deliver its ruling next week. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy reports.
Kenya and Somalia have engaged in a protracted legal battle at the International Court of Justice over a maritime border. And over 100,000 square kilometers of Indian Ocean waters has since 2014 been at the center of the dispute. In March, Kenya withdrew from the case, accusing the court of bias.
The delivery of the judgment will be the culmination of a flawed judicial process that Kenya has had reservations with and withdrawn from on account not just of its obvious and inherent bias, but also of its unsuitability to resolve the dispute at hand.
The disputed area off the coast is thought to be rich in oil and gas. Kenya maintains that the dispute with Somalia be resolved through amicable negotiations.
It is important for every Kenyan to understand that threats to territorial integrity are now no longer necessarily overt or direct. The filing of a case against Kenya at the court and the court's assumption of jurisdiction where it had none are demonstrative of new tactics of using pseudo-judicial processes to undermine territorial integrity.
The East African country has also withdrawn its recognition of the court's compulsory jurisdiction.
As a sovereign nation, Kenya shall no longer be subject to an international court or tribunal without its expressed consent.
The government has called on Kenyans to remain calm as the country awaits the final judgment. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Time now for another short break. We've got your business segment coming up next. Here's a peek at the headlines. Sri Lankan Airlines launches flights to Nairobi as it expands operations into Africa.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines.
You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to our business segment in Africa Live. Let's start off in Sri Lanka, where the country's national carrier, the Sri Lankan Airlines, has launched flights to Nairobi on Friday as it expands operations into Africa. This is expected to be a significant cargo route in capitalizing on key trade routes in connectivity to the present network. Flights to and from Nairobi are expected to be scheduled every Thursday. The direct flights between Colombo and Nairobi is fast improving the fortunes of Kenyan flower firms and helping boost the battered tourism sector.
Moving forward, we believe in the future that we will work together bilaterally, and also we invite you to use Sri Lanka as your gateway to Asia and of course to the southern hemisphere. As it is now, we have invested heavily on our maritime infrastructure and aviation. It was President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's vision to continue to create Sri Lanka as a maritime hub.
There is no tourism destination without connectivity. And we are glad, Mr. Ambassador, for facilitating this connectivity between Nairobi and Colombo, and not only because of tourism, but also we have a very good partnership also in the agricultural sector, the tea industry.
The Tanzania Railways Corporation has received 44 Chinese-made freight wagons. It's part of a World Bank finance project to upgrade the country's transport logistics along the Central Railway line. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has more.
The wagons were bought through a World Bank $290 million loan for the country's intermodal rail development project. The project aims to revamp the central line running from Dar es Salaam to Kigoma. The cash is also going towards buying locomotives and tamping machines. The wagons have been made in China by the CCRC International Corporation Limited, with each having a capacity of 46 tons. The newly acquired wagons will boost freight services at the Dar es Salaam port by reducing loading and unloading time to 24 hours from 3 days. Tanzania is a lifeline for the landlocked countries of Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The TRC management has been tasked with taking proper care of the wagons for them to be used by future generations as well as collecting revenue. Tanzania has two railway systems, a central line extending towards Kigoma and Mwanza run by the TRC and a southern route which extends from Dar es Salaam into Zambia managed by the Tanzanian Zambia Railway Authority. The Director General of the Tanzania Railway Corporation said that the implementation of the project from Dar es Salaam to Morogoro has reached 93% and will be finished in early 2022. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Tunisia is hosting the 16th edition of the Mediterranean Building Exhibition Medibat. This year's edition is in fact Tunisia's economic hub in the south. Libya has been invited as the guest of honor. And there's also keen focus on China, which experts say plays a central role in reviving the building and construction sector in the continent. Adnan Shawashi reports.
The Tunisian Minister of Public Works, Housing and Spatial Planning declared that 150 exhibitors in the fields of construction and public works from 17 countries of Africa, Europe and Latin America are taking part in this international event.
We rely on this fair to strengthen Tunisia's positioning in Africa in the building and construction sectors, especially the public-private partnership, and to export the services of our companies to Africa and the Mediterranean region.
Members of the Libyan delegation said that boosting cooperation between Tunis and Tripoli is necessary in order to step up Libya's reconstruction after years of civil war. The host of the exhibition, the Sfax Chamber of Commerce and Industry, aims to boost partnership with Libyan enterprises.
The partnership between Tunisian and Libyan construction companies is vital for the economy. Several projects are underway in Libyan municipalities. This international event aims to strengthen the existing partnership and to look for new markets.
Officials at the event said that Chinese construction and engineering companies can play an important role in infrastructure projects in Libya and throughout Africa.
Chinese companies have huge capacity, the know-how and the skills to lead reconstruction projects in Libya. Our experience with Chinese firms has always been successful in the telecom sector since 2011. China can help rebuild Libya with its talented workforce as well as the gigantic construction firms. We welcome our Chinese friends in Libya.
We have strong cooperation ties with China in different domains like infrastructure. We think China can take its active part in the development of the building sector. China is already building social housing in Mali. Malian contractors and enterprises are already working closely with Chinese enterprises.
The Malian delegation in Sfax has presented the project of development of river-nature banks in the capital Bamako over several kilometers under a public partnership project. Malian officials expressed hope to see Tunisia contribute to the realization of this project as a distinguished partner. Tunisian authorities say the 16th edition of the Mediterranean Building Exhibition seeks to develop exchanges between African, European, Asian and South American professionals. Senior members of the Arab Asian Chamber of Commerce and the Africa Link Business Network took part in the event in Sfax. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Tunisia's central bank has kept its benchmark interest rate unchanged in a move aimed at kickstarting the economy. The regulator held the rate at 6.25%, where it's been since the last cut about a year ago. As CGTN's Adnan Shawashi reports, the meeting was its second since President Kais Saied suspended parliament and fired the then prime minister in July.
The Executive Board of Tunisia's Central Bank has expressed concern about the acute drying up of external financial resources, which has left its economy facing one of its worst financial crises. Following a meeting with President Kais Saied, Tunisia's central bank governor said the North African state is keen on respecting recommendations of international donors in order to provide external financial resources.
I have discussed with the President of Tunisia about the relations with international donors, mainly the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. The President insisted that Tunisia will continue to work seriously with the World Bank and the IMF. This strategy will allow us to implement a structural reform plan which is adapted to our needs. It should be a win-win relationship.
The Apex Bank governor added that the central bank is currently developing the supplementary finance law for 2021 and the draft budgetary plan for 2022. Marwan Al-Abbasi noted that Tunisia is facing the challenge of mobilizing external resources.
We're working on Tunisia's monetary and tax policy as well as the 2021 supplementary state budget. The 2022 state budget is underway. We're expecting an economic recovery because Tunisia is looking for an additional source to fund the state fund. Tunisia also needs the support of its close friends at this difficult period.
Economists assert that the deterioration of public finances and the rise in international oil prices are likely to have an adverse effect on the country's public debt. Moreover, the increase in public sector indebtedness could affect the banking system and its ability to finance the economy.
The gap between what's available to the state fund and its need is huge until the end of this year or in the next 3 months. It's around $2.83 billion. This money is not available for the moment, while state expenses for the energy and other needs are increasing. Tunisia should not resort to extreme solutions like asking the central bank to finance the state budget deficit. This will be a dangerous move.
Experts have called for the consolidation of public sector governance and the improvement of the business climate in the North African country. The Executive Board of the Central Bank of Tunisia announced that the persistence of this critical situation will have negative repercussions on external balances and on the foreign exchange market. The board decided to keep unchanged the key interest rate of the Central Bank of Tunisia. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
A global network of humanitarian agencies have signed a climate risk insurance policy that will protect up to 160,000 people in Senegal from the effects of drought. The $1.5 million policy, one of the first of its kind, was signed by START Network, which is a global network of more than 50 humanitarian agencies and provided by African Risk Capacity. It will enable aid agencies to offer life-saving support to people in Senegal as soon as a drought is predicted, helping to prevent famine. Built on parametric insurance, the policy pays out before a crisis based on pre-agreed scientific triggers such as rainfall data. It is a welcome change from the current model in which aid agencies receive funding only after a crisis has hit. Sudan's capital is experiencing shortages of essential supplies and commodities due to ongoing protests. Fuel and cooking gas queues have been growing in the city because of a blockade of the main port by protesters. Now, many bakeries have also stopped working amid disruptions to the supply of wheat. CGTN's Naba Muhyiddin reports from Khartoum.
Public anger is growing in Khartoum as fuel, wheat and medicines run short. It's caused by a port blockade in the east of Sudan, where roads have been blocked by demonstrators, stopping the flow of goods between Port Sudan and Khartoum. The local airport of Port Sudan City is closed too. The protest started 2 weeks ago, when the tribe leaders said they want solutions to poor economic conditions in the Red Sea region. The eastern tribes also rejected the peace deal signed with rebel groups after the ouster of Omar al-Bashir and demanded a political representation in the transitional period. The Port of Sudan is the main gateway for imports and exports. It's also vital for oil exports from the neighboring South Sudan. The transitional government is negotiating the reopening of the main port, while the protesting tribes are still rejecting any mediations. Naba Muhyiddin, CGTN, Khartoum, Sudan.
Zambia has been marking an Energy Week to sensitize consumers on renewable energy technologies. This is in line with the government's goal to invest in diverse sources of energy to realize desired economic goals. Consumers have been treated to locally available renewable energy alternatives as well as ways to use available energy efficiently. The week has also endeavored to raise public awareness on government programs and developments in the energy sector. The New Dawn government is committed to providing energy security. It promises to deliver universal access to clean and modern energy services by 2030 and establish Zambia as a net exporter of energy.
We are moving towards a rich energy mix where we are looking at renewable energies, and we've set up a department specifically to focus on these initiatives of green energy, which is much more sustainable. And sustainability is defined as, meeting today's needs without sacrificing the needs of the future. So what are we doing? We've already invested in solar energy, and at the moment we are injecting about 84 megawatts of solar-powered electricity into the national grid. We have already engaged and started implementing the 600 megawatts energy in Chibombo 200, Kafue, as well as Siavonga. And 600 megawatts plus another 84 megawatts, we are looking at moving the country towards renewable energies as the only sustainable energy sources.
Collaboration between mobile phone operators, banks, and fintech startups are changing businesses and financial services in Tanzania. This trend is expected to further promote the use of digital payments. Fintech solutions like Nta are changing the way low-income Tanzanians save and access funds to improve their livelihoods. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has more.
Founded just 3 months ago, financial technology company Nta is offering low-income Tanzanians an opportunity to save the items they need without having to use a bank. Since June this year, the company has already grown 5 times. With 5,000 registered accounts, 100 people registering on the platform each day, this is just one of the many fintech companies that are mushrooming in Tanzania's financial service sector. With over 1,000 placed orders, 200 businesses signed up to sell goods on the platform, Nta's founder says his company exists for one function: to use technology for enhancing financial inclusion.
We found our sweet spot, which is the combination of a marketplace. We put merchants here, people who are selling TVs, cell phones, on one platform. And then on the other side, you have people who have their money on mobile money services. So we thought, what if we could combine these two, allow people to access goods and services, but at the same time using technology and some banking knowledge.
The government works with organizations like the Financial Sector Deepening Trust, or FSDT, to drive the shift in the financial inclusion agenda, from access to usage and quality. According to FinScope Tanzania 2017, Tanzania has made remarkable progress in expanding the opportunities for people to access and use financial services. The use of formal financial services has reached 65% in 2017 compared to 57.7% in 2013.
If we are to refer to the statistics from 2017 FinScope, we have a complete turn of the market where we're having 65% of the people, by and large, are actually included in the financial system. And the biggest driver of that has actually been the digital financial services. And from in one way or another, the digital financial services is a disruption that has happened. And that's basically what you're talking about, fintech here coming to have a big play into the financial sector development in the market.
Mobile money solutions like M-Pesa, offered by Vodacom, and Tigo Pesa, offered by Tigo, were some of the first crossover financial solutions, connecting banks to mobile phone users. Since then, the growth in active mobile wallets reaching over 21 million users, which are held by 16.6 million Tanzanian adults, as reported by FinScope Tanzania 2017. But the head of FSDT feels this is just the beginning.
You need to be thinking grand, you need to thinking major, and that is an excellent competence that is actually being brought about by the MNOs. They know how to actually reach the people. They have the mechanism to actually be able to extend those rails so that they're able to reach. So a combination of the two, And then, interesting enough, you're also bringing in the fintechs. Fintechs by themselves, they also have a huge role because these guys they're bubbling with ideas, disruptive ideas, ideas that will actually change the business model that is needed.
Technologies like Nta offer safe and secure transactions that let customers and businesses operate with confidence. It's hoped that this financial inclusion increase will create capital accumulation, which in turn increases economic growth. A few years ago, financial institutions, mobile phone companies, and fintech companies were competing to service Tanzania's 67% unbanked population. But as financial inclusion, innovation, and technologies grow, the separating line between these players is slowly getting blurred, allowing a blending of services that is enhancing access to financial services for the people who need it most. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
And we are not done just yet. We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Don't go away. Stay tuned. Here's what's ahead. Egyptian talisman Mohamed Salah among 30 nominees for the coveted Ballon d'Or award.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find